Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Ali and I'm going to my second year of university studying maths at Cambridge. So today I thought it would be a good idea to kind of go over everything that I learned in my first year and put it in a tier list. Obviously it's going to be my subjective opinion, but I'm going to rank it on how interesting I found content to be, the problem sheets, which is like the homework you get, how difficult they were, how interesting they were, and then I'll put it in a list of like god tier, decent, and drop this shit. Pretty self-explanatory. God tier courses, stuff that I thought were like top notch. Decent is stuff that I enjoyed and I don't mind doing more of. Meh is like it felt like a chore, but I didn't hate it. And obviously drop the shit means the first chance I get, I'm dipping. To begin with, some background information. So in your first year you get prescribed 8 courses that you take, and I kind of have a picture for each one here. So this first picture is representing the first course, vectors and matrices. The second picture is dynamics and relativity. Third picture is groups. Fourth picture is differential equations. Fifth picture is numbers and sets. Sixth picture is vector calculus. Seventh is probability, and eighth is analysis 1. So there's this file called the schedules, which basically has all the courses for all the different years and what a rough outline of the material is and what books are recommended and stuff like that. So the first year is called IA, so that's the first year at Cambridge. As I said, so in your first term, which we call Michaelmas term, you have these 2 courses, and then these 2, so you have these 4 courses. Each is 24 lectures. So as I said, groups, vectors and matrices, differential equations, numbers and sets. And then in Lent term, we have another 4, analysis 1. I don't know why it's called analysis 1, because there's no analysis 2. But it's probability, dynamics and relativity, and vector calculus. 4 applied courses and 4 pure courses, 2 of each in both term 1 and term 2. So you do like an equal number of pure and applied, which I think is pretty good. So the very first course, groups. So I know about groups of people, I don't know about groups, so I'm not really the guy to talk about. But basically the stuff that you learn is apparently this shit. So examples of groups: homomorphisms, isomorphisms, Mobius group, Lagrange theorem, group actions, quotient groups, which I forgot what that is, matrix groups, permutations, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's all the content that you learn in group theory. I never really learned groups properly, so I can't really chat, so I'm afraid that's going straight to drop this shit. So it'll be interesting to see if I end up taking the groups continuation course for this year, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, definitely group theory, drop this shit. I never really liked it. It never clicked, never put really effort into it, and obviously I got smoked in the exams, but I don't know enough currently to be able to give any review of groups, so that's going straight to the bottom one because I'm trying to avoid it. Okay, the next course, vectors and matrices. So if we go back to the schedules, here it is. So a rough outline of what you do complex numbers for 2 lectures. So that's basically going over all the stuff you probably learned in further maths, but you might do complex logarithms, which you probably didn't do. Then we do vectors in 3 dimensions and then n dimensions, a lot of matrices, and then in the end we have like eigenvalues, eigenvectors, and Cayley-Hamilton theory, Jordan-Olmo forms, and all that stuff. The best way to describe this course is it's a bit simple, in the sense of it is quite intuitive. But the thing is with this course, what I realized is loads of people didn't really understand what was going on when we initially got the course lectured in Michaelmas, but then eventually it just clicked, and once it clicks, then you really understand what you're doing. So in terms of the content, I felt the content was really interesting. Like, you learn a lot of these interesting facts, what a matrix actually is, because you don't really learn what it is at further maths. You only learn how to like compute stuff with them. You learn all about the vector stuff, CS inequality, vector spaces, linear span, how to solve systems equations, and a lot of stuff about eigenvectors, eigenvalues, what they mean, and some interesting results with them. And yeah, I really enjoyed the content. In terms of the problem sheets, how interesting the questions were. I feel like the questions were quite interesting. It is an applied course, so it's not going to be too interesting. But I feel like for what the content is, for what the course is, the questions were really good. Like, they were set at a nice level. They weren't too easy, but they weren't too hard. So most of the questions were pretty accessible if you tried and you understand the content well. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. And this was basically one of the 2 courses that I put a lot of effort into, the other one being differential equations. But unfortunately in the exam, even though I put a lot of effort into vectors and matrices, I got ripped in half. So for this reason, I'm going to put this in God tier. I'm definitely going to be taking linear algebra this year, which is like the pure version and the continuation, because I really enjoyed it. The content was good, questions weren't too hard, and everything was just good about it. Okay, the next course is Dynamics and Relativity. So that's the one you take towards the second half of the year. And this one's a bit weird. When the content was being lectured, I thought it was pretty interesting. So you learn a lot of stuff about like Gaussian transformations, forces, rigid bodies, orbits, planets, all this stuff, and then you do a bit of like special relativity. The content of the problem sheets was probably interesting, but I felt like it was very hard for me. At least for the later sheets, being able to understand all this inertial stuff and rotation was something that I found quite tricky. But the problem sheets, like, they weren't exceptionally difficult, but I think they were definitely some of the harder ones in the course. Probably meh. It's something that I could conceivably do if I practice a lot more. But it's definitely not something that I would enjoy doing. Like, I would see it as a chore, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, this is a popular opinion across Mathmos, is that this course kind of just sucks. So it's going in this section. Okay, the next course is Differential Equations. So this is a very methodical and systematic course. You basically learn what differential equations are, and about maybe a fourth or a third of the course is going to be revision from A-level, but it's covered in a nice way, and you do learn how to solve a whole arsenal of differential equations. So we learn about stuff like the Wronskian, we learn how to find second solutions, particular integrals, we learned like multivariate calculus, the basics of that, basic partial differential equations like the wave equation, diffusion equation. But we also did a bit about solving systems of linear differential equations using matrix methods. But I feel like that was quite poorly covered. But nonetheless, as you can see, you do learn a lot about differential equations, a lot of qualitative methods as well as quantitative. So I feel like for what it is, it's a pretty good course. You don't really learn rigorous proofs for a lot of the propositions that we learn. And well, for me, anyways, I don't really care. I feel like it's set at the right rigor amount for me, which is not very rigorous. But a lot of people used to complain that basically a lot of this stuff didn't get proved properly, but I mean, they're just nerds in it, so it is what it is. In terms of the problem sheets, I felt like they quite accurately reflected the tone of the course, which is basically just solving a shit ton of differential equations. So it wasn't too interesting, like the problems weren't inherently interesting, and they were quite bashy, which means like extremely computational. But I feel like it was a course that you can just sit down and work on some questions without thinking too much, and that's something that I like at least. Like, I like just going down and doing loads of algebra and calculus, but some people just don't like that, I guess. So I'll probably put this in decent. Okay, the next course, numbers and sets. So this is like one of the very first pure courses that you do at uni. And it's quite interesting. So if you look here, you do basics of like logic, number systems, sets, functions, inclusion, exclusion principles, stuff like that. We also do a shit ton of number theory, so integers definition, binomial theorem, Euclid's algorithm, what was that thing called? Oh, Bizarre's identity. You do loads of modular arithmetic, so we did like Wilson's theorem, Euler-Stoichern function, and Fermat's little theorem. That went on my mind. Chinese remainder theorem as well, and the Fermat-Euler theorem as well, which is pretty good. We have some applications into RSA algorithm and some basic cryptography, which is good. You also do a little bit of analysis, so you do stuff on like the reals, irrationality, sequences, series, convergence, stuff like that, and how to construct a transcendental number, which is the one thing that like nobody learned, but it came up in the exam. Oh yeah, you also do a section on countability, which was quite interesting, and very counterintuitive, which is why it was pretty interesting. In terms of the problem sheet, so it is a pure course, which means the problems are going to be on average harder. Like, it starts off from very basic number theory questions, and the final few questions on the sheet can be like harder than IMO. But yeah, I feel like the problem sheets, the questions were definitely interesting. Like you prove loads of interesting results, and the difficulty varies a lot. In terms of difficulty, it's probably the hardest course, I think, in terms of how hard the questions can get. As I said, they can go beyond IMO, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. Like, I enjoyed it, but I didn't put that much effort into it after like we were lectured it and after problem sheets were due. So I would say this definitely goes on the decent. Like, I can definitely see myself doing this type of stuff in future years, but I probably need to get better at it. I mean, I am planning on taking number theory in my third year, but number theory is just one part of this. Okay, the next course is vector calculus. So this is something that you do in your Lent term. I feel like this course was great. It introduced you to very fundamental things in maths: curves, arc length, line integrals, surface volume integrals, Cartesian, cylindrical, spherical coordinates, change of variables, Jacobian, gradient, Laplacian, and all these different things like divergence, curl, vector fields, potentials, all that stuff. You also do like the very classic things, so like divergence theorem, Green's theorem, Stokes theorem. So like once you've learned this content, you actually feel like you've learned some uni level maths, because this stuff is like fundamental for loads of more applied courses later on. So like fluid dynamics, electrodynamics, methods, and yeah, it's definitely like a course that is there to teach you some fundamentals. Laplace's equations, uniqueness, all that stuff, solving Poisson's equation, which I don't remember what this shit is. You also do Cartesian tenses, which I also don't remember, but I remember they used to be like loads of symbols and shit. In terms of the content, I feel like it was the most interesting because it's like the most useful in my opinion. The problem sheets were also ones I actually enjoyed the most, so it was like the right combo of interesting content and accessible problems. Like, I feel like problem sheets wise, it was probably my favorite, because you do need to think a bit about them, but it also comes down to loads of algebra and calculus and stuff, which is my particularly strong point in maths. I would definitely put this in God tier. Like, this made me want to take loads of the applied courses later on, because I figured out vector calculus is I think what I'm good at, so definitely a God tier course, in my opinion. Okay, the next course is probability. So going back to here, so the thing is, in Cambridge everyone does a STEP exam, and like there's a stats and probability section in STEP, and if you prepared for the probability question in STEP, then you're basically like halfway through the first year course in probability. Like, you would have seen loads of these things already, which I have and many other people have. Nonetheless though, I feel like this was a really good course. So you learn the basics of probability, classical probability, basic combinatorics, axioms and all the different distributions, Poisson, binomial, geometric. You learn Simpson's paradox, conditional probability, Bayes theorem, random walks, branching processes, probability generating functions, continuous random variables, transforming them. You learn some geometrical probabilities, so stuff like Bertrand's paradox, Buffon's noodle, stuff like that. You learn about bivariate normal random variables, which is pretty interesting, and learn about inequalities, so like Markov's inequality, Chebyshev's, Jensen's, and you get introduced to the central limit theorem, which is a very useful theorem in probability. In terms of the content, this is definitely really interesting. Although I have seen most of the content before, it's definitely up there for interesting content and also very useful content. It was a bit weird because I feel like the problem sheets on probability were probably one of the easiest ones across the whole course in my first year. Loads of the questions in this course was like definitely at the same level as STEP, and some of the questions are actually shorter versions of STEP 1 questions. So the problem sheets aren't ridiculously difficult. In fact, they're probably one of the easiest ones. So they were very accessible but still interesting, and you solve some interesting problems like the coupon collector problem and loads of other geometric probability questions and stuff like that. Overall, I'll definitely put it in a God tier course in my opinion. Also, this course is categorized as pure, but it's definitely, I think, more applied than vectors and matrices, but that's just my opinion. Okay, the final course left over is analysis 1. So obviously it's analysis, which is very pure, and you learn about stuff like limits and convergence, continuous functions, differentiability, integration, power series. Loads of these things are very like intuitive results that you have probably seen before. However, the interesting thing is not the results inherently, but the way you go about proving these results in a very rigorous manner that makes sense. So for example, Rolle's theorem, the mean value theorem, the intermediate value theorem, those are like very common sense results, but it's still very interesting to see how you prove them rigorously, and that's what analysis is all about. So in terms of the content, it was not inherently interesting, but you do get introduced to ways of thinking about proving stuff rigorously, and you do pick up loads of interesting results if you don't know them already. I didn't really think the problem sheets were that interesting. Some of the questions were quite hard. Some of them were not that hard. They definitely varied. It is a pure course after all. So I might watch future analysis related courses, lectures in the future, but only to develop my background knowledge as a mathematician, and not really because I really enjoyed the content. Bro, this course is so dry that it made my lips dry. So yeah, I wasn't really enthusiastic about this course. Like, I wouldn't wake up middle of the morning and be like, I can't wait to do some analysis questions. So yeah, for that reason, I definitely saw it as a chore, and therefore it goes under meh. Alright guys, there you go. So these are all the 8 courses that I took in my first year. Put in a tier list overall what I thought about the course in terms of how interesting it was, how accessible were the questions, and how interesting were the questions. Some people probably like literally reflect this graph and put this first and maybe some of these later on, but I don't really care. It's my channel. If you don't agree with it, I don't really care. So if anyone has any video suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. I'm probably going to be making loads of videos on how to revise for like GCSEs, A-levels, admission tests, Oxford stuff, and loads of extra stuff to come. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and yeah, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the future. Peace.